Community update meeting. This has been a long haul. We still have a good haul to go, and I am not going to speak much tonight at all. I just want to welcome you folks, give you a quick update on where we've been, where we're at, and then in terms of where we're going, turn it over to Tom Green and Siobhan Mitchell, board members, 2 of our 9 board members, to talk about our ongoing site search, and upcoming capital campaign, and then also to talk about the sales projections, some tentative sales projections, and then after that, really to open it up to everybody for questions and answers. So this is really an opportunity for you who are here to ask those questions, and I would imagine that a lot of the questions that you'll be asking, people who are watching on Facebook would also want the answers to. If you, we will be posting the actual presentation, and then we'll the post if you're a frequent Facebooker, the post of this video will be on Facebook after it goes live. I mean, it'll be on it live, and then after we shut off live, it becomes a post on our page. So you can always, if there was something you weren't quite clear about, aside from emailing me or any member of the board, you can always jump back on Facebook and find the video. So. The road to opening day began, as you guys probably know, maybe not everybody knows. If you're a before 600er, you definitely know. Began back in early 2013. That's when board member, or rather owner number 1, Siobhan, came on board. And so if you're feeling the impatience, you've got someone to commiserate with. And totally understandable. They take 5 to 8 years to open. That is the average startup process for a food co-op, for a successful food co-op who does it in this this grow, fund, build path. And we are at the tail end of that 5 to 8 year process. We are right on track, although it might not feel like it, and I get that too. I'm owner 143, 2.5 years in. I thought, where the heck's my co-op? So, but in any case, this is kind of a rough sketch of how the co-op goes. In terms of that timeline. Tom will be getting into this in more detail at the end, is my understanding, but we have already conducted our initial market study back at about 300 owners. That is standard procedure for a co-op, and reached 600 owners a year ago, December, I think, or January. So December 2016 or January 2017, and reached 900 owners in December of 2017. 2017.
Yep, 2017.
Yep. Yeah. So that was the minimum we needed in order to pursue sites, and that is the point where we are now. It's important to note that we have been measuring so many milestones based on owner numbers. We still need owners as much as we ever did. So neighbors, friends, co-workers, please spread the word, because the more owners, yes, the faster the capital campaign, the faster we open, and we need more. But 900 is a huge accomplishment, and it opens the gates for the search and then for the capital campaign after that. But at this point, we start measuring our timeline based on site search, how long that takes, any hiccups along the way, and the capital campaign itself, which is typically 4 to 6 months long. So I just wanted to show you one more. Can you click 2? Well, you can click 1, I guess, gets us to here, and then yeah. Some of you have seen this online, but just to kind of give you another idea of where we're at on that timeline, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tom. This has been the phase we've been in for the past 4.5 years or so. This growth phase, again, growth never ends. Co-ops grow into thousands and thousands of owners, because the more owners, the stronger, the more sustainable, the longer lasting the business. So we will continue to grow. But we reached that point, and here's where we are. Between the growing and the funding stage, that site selection process gets underway, and it can take several months. And sites do fall through and that sort of thing. So, but once that is completed, once we announce that that spot, we move on through these other stages. So, but again, I'm going to leave the rest of this to Tom and Siobhan, and then again afterward we're going to open it up to Q&A. So thank you guys again for coming, and turn it over to Tom.
Thank you, Lauren. I'll just, one of the things that I wanted to say, and Lauren was fairly matter of fact about it, that in January of 2017 we hit 600 owners, and by December of 2017 we had 900 owners, and the significant difference that happened in January of 2017 is that we hired Lauren. And so the 300 owners that we got in a year is due in very large part to the work that Lauren and the team of people that he's put together to go out and do tabling and outreach, and putting together our social media campaign has been really tremendous and incredibly worthwhile to the co-op. So thank you. All right, if you want to switch to the next slide here. So the site search is on. We actually began outreach and talking to a number of realtors and property owners in town before we hit 900 owners, but it's really once the point that you get to 900 owners is in general what we had looked at based on the size of the store, the amount of money that we needed to raise. We felt that if we hit 900 owners, that was the point where we could actually commit to a site if we found one that met our requirements. But so I think that what I would say is that we've really put it into a higher gear, although we talked to a lot of property owners in town prior to hitting 900 owners. I think that I've talked about market studies, and I'm sure that most of you, if you've been to any co-op presentations, have heard our discussion of market studies. As Lauren said, the first one that we got was done in June of 2015, so nearly almost 3 years ago. Market studies provide projected sales for the first 3 or 4 years of the operation of a store of a specified size and at a specified location. We always refer to them as market studies, but essentially the value that the companies that provide is that they're doing sales forecasting. So we give them a location in town. It's obviously not exactly where the store is going to be, since we don't know where it is, but a theoretical location within the town and a store size. And then they come into town, do an analysis. The original market study, the woman came into town, spent 3 days going to literally every competitive store in the town, looking at all of the access in towns in terms of roads, the foot traffic downtown, so she got a very good idea of where things would be coming from. What we used and what we're using is a projected store size of 5,000 square feet of retail space. Which means about 7,500 to 8,000 square feet of total store space, because you need back of store area for storage, for administrative rooms and work rooms, and all of the prep areas and so forth, and then an additional space that we would have for community space, which we intend to have in the store. So it's probably in the neighborhood of 8,000 to 10,000 square feet of a total building that we're looking at, and the way that the sales forecasting is done is on the number of square feet of retail space that you're going to have in the store. Essentially, how much can you put into the store, and what will people have access to buy? And what we've been told is that you can have a full-service grocery store. I think the minimum size that we've heard from the people that have done market studies and store layouts is about 4,500 square feet. So we're looking at something that would be able to have a full service of all of the things that you would expect to get at a grocery store in that space. Based on that size, you need about 25 to 35 dedicated, immediately accessible parking spaces for customers, and then you'll need another 15 parking spaces for employees. And those spaces don't need to be immediately adjacent to the building, but they certainly can't be too far away. So just as a real recent update, we recently contracted for and have received a second updated market study from the firm that did with the original one in 2015, G2G Research Group. They did the first update when we first heard that Whole Foods was moving from Wayland to Sudbury, and the Wayland store was outside of what we expected to be our target market area, but the Sudbury store is in as well, at the edge of it, still within the area where we expected to draw customers from. So we assumed that would have an impact, and we wanted to find out how much of an impact. And at the time, I think that when they did the analysis, they believed that they projected our sales would drop, or the sales forecast was about 7%-ish lower than what they had originally projected, just based on the fact that there's, at the time, was going to be, and now is, a very large Whole Foods in Sudbury. So we actually had them do a second update to take a look at a few other locations within the town, and also to update based on current competitive environment. And the other thing that we did is we hired a second full market study from another company called Dakota Worldwide, and they came out and did the on-site survey the same way that they did it the first time, where a woman came to town, spent several days here going to all of the competitive stores in the area, taking a look at traffic patterns and so forth. They used different forecasting models, but they examined common sites. So part of the intent behind that was, okay, now that we're getting down to very seriously looking at sites, we want to have, you know, more than one data set out there that says, you know, how much money do you expect to be able to get in terms of sales at a particular location. So now having two different companies come in and look at a similar site, we get a pretty good idea of, I mean, if they were wildly different, or, you know, are they fairly close? And the short answer was that they weren't exactly the same, but they were relatively close, which gives us a pretty confident feeling in terms of the projections that we're getting from the market studies. I could go into the difference in the forecasting models. It's not terribly interesting, other than that one basically sort of uses secret sauce. They say, okay, given the demographics of the area, how likely are people to come to your store? The other one actually looks at all of the competitive stores in the area and says, all right, based on where those stores are located, where the target area of our store is going to be, and the demographics of people in that area, how likely are people that shop at existing stores likely to quit shopping there and come to the co-op. And so then they did their projections that way. At the end of the day, basically what all of the market studies look at is location. And the primary things that they're looking at is accessibility, taking a look at the roads, the infrastructure getting into where the sites are, and the visibility of where the store would be located. So if somebody's driving or walking down the street, is the store visible? How close is it to other businesses? So, you know, what kind of foot traffic might you be able to get based on other people, you know, walking through the town or through the area where you're planning on having the store.
Tom, could you just move the mic up a little bit there?
Oh, sure.
I'm just looking for more bodies on the video.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
The other thing, and I mentioned, is demographics, and that's basically the potential shoppers at the store. So all of these firms that do market studies have their own definition, but they have a pretty good idea. In fact, both of these companies specialize in organic and natural food stores and do a lot of work with food co-ops. The Dakota Worldwide actually was doing all of the market studies for Whole Foods before Whole Foods brought it in-house. So they have a pretty long history of having done this. And then the last thing that they take a look at, and like you said before, is the competition. So they went through and looked at literally every grocery store, every farmer's market in the area, and took a look at the size of the store, what their current sales are, and to get an idea of, you know, what, how likely it is that people would leave where it is that they're currently shopping to come to the co-op. If you want to go to the next slide. Thanks. So how's it going? The thing that we've always said and will continue to say is potential sites are not going to be shared, and we're not going to talk about them before signing a lease. It's fairly obvious. Sales projections that we're getting from the market study are one major input into the pro forma, the financial model that Siobhan will be talking about later. But the other, one of the other major inputs into that is costs. So the cost of the building, either if you're buying a piece of land, and then what it would cost to develop it into the store, or if you're leasing an existing property, and again, the costs that it would take to turn that existing property into a grocery store. So those things, because there are likely to be several places that we would end up looking at, you don't want to be tipping your hat to whoever it is that you're negotiating with for a lease rate or the purchase price of a property. So we have taken a look at multiple sites in town. Most of them, but not all of them, are problematic. But problematic doesn't mean rejected out of hand. There are issues with some of the sites that we've talked about, but depending on where we ultimately land, I think that there isn't going to be any perfect property, but we want to pick the one that is best in terms of meeting all the criteria that we talked about: accessibility, location, and then obviously the cost to develop the site. One of the things that I will talk about, and it can kind of give you an idea of what we've looked at and the issues that come up, is one site that we rejected, and it's now been purchased by somebody else and will be developed for something other than a grocery store. So I think it's fine for us to at least talk about that site, and that's the Gruber Brothers location on Main Street. We went into Gruber Brothers, it's probably been a year and a half ago or close to it, not long after it originally went on the market. But we went in with another developer to take a look at the site, primarily because Gruber Brothers is the current owner, I'm sure you'll see, is a complete tear down of the two buildings, the existing furniture store and the parking or whatever that other cement block building is that's out in the back. They'll all be taken down. So it would be a fairly significant cost above and beyond the purchase price of the property to develop the site. It's also, given the town zoning, it would have to be a minimum of 2 stories of the building that you'd have to put in there. The square footage for the existing building is almost exactly the size that we would need for a store. However, if you were just to tear that down and to build a 1-story store, assuming that the town gave you the zoning variance to do that, the cost would be so high for us to be able to, that we couldn't afford it. So that's why we went in to look with another developer to take a look at developing the building where we would have the first floor and the second and third floors could be used either for office space or potentially for apartments or condos. But then the difficulty is that if you're sharing a piece of property, you have to have not only parking for ourselves, but parking for whoever else would share the building. And the parking was pretty problematic on that site, even for the co-op. I think that we, in the best case, came up with that you could get about 25 parking spaces on the site, which would be at the short end of what we would need for ourselves, and certainly wouldn't have any room if they were doing a development for other people in the building. So at the end of the day, that was why we rejected it. The other piece, and while there is other parking available in the town lot, it's on the other side of the rail trail, and currently all of that town parking that's over there is metered. So it would be, one, a long distance, which is sort of defeats the issue of immediately accessible parking, and 2, even if you did park over there and were willing to walk that distance to get to the further away parking, you'd have to pay to park there, so not an optimal location for that. And the reason that parking ultimately is such a huge issue in any of the sites is that it has to be immediately adjacent and immediately accessible. And the easiest way that I've tried to explain it when I've talked to people when they're asking about it, and when we've talked with realtors and others looking at pieces of property, is that imagine February when you've got a full grocery cart and a 3-year-old with you and you need to get it out to your car. So if you have to walk a block or 2 to get to your car, the likelihood that you come back to the co-op to shop again is pretty low. So you need to be able to have a parking lot where you can walk 2 rows at the most to get to your car and load your groceries in. So I think that that's really kind of the biggest stumbling block, at least with regard to parking that we've had. You want to hit the next slide? So here's a question that's come up, and I think that we need to make very clear exactly what will happen. So what if we can't find a place in Maynard? The big, bold answer there is that we will come back to our owners and tell you that, and then decide where to go from there, and let the owners have a lot of input and discussion. I mean, there's plenty of things that, and alternatives, I think we would obviously present some. We would be looking for others, and then, do we want to look outside the town? Do we want to look at a smaller store? I mean, there's plenty of options to be discussed, but they won't be discussed until we literally hit a point where we think that we've talked to everybody in town and every space that and we're certainly nowhere near there. But it would likely be done as a highly publicized special meeting of all of the owners. In the same way that it was actually an annual owners meeting, but when we wanted to talk about spending owner equity, we made sure that every owner got a postcard from us. We followed up with postcards after the meeting. It was, publicized about as highly as we could, and we would clearly do the same thing. And not only because it's the right thing to do, but there's also a counter example of what happens when you don't do that. So the Manchester Food Co-op in New Hampshire had gotten to about this point. I think they were actually a little larger. They had over 1,000 owners. They'd been looking for sites in Manchester for a long time, and there was an existing grocery store in Bedford, New Hampshire, that was going out of business, and it was offered to them for relatively cheap money, and they could go in without having to spend a lot of money because it was already a grocery store. And so their board said, great, and they signed a lease, and they hired a general manager. And almost all of the 1,000 owners said, we bought into having a store in Manchester, not one in Bedford. And when they went to do their capital campaign, they got pretty much nothing. And that co-op has now been abandoned. So that is not something that we are going to do. Absolutely. So if this happens, and knock on podium it doesn't, we will come back to our owners and let you know that that's happened. But back to the previous slide, and you don't need to go, no, you don't need to go back there, but I was just, one of the things that was on there was, while many of the sites that we've seen are problematic, not all of them are, and not all of the problems that we have found are insurmountable. So I would say that we are still at a point where we feel fairly confident that we will find a location within Maynard to open the food co-op. At that point, I will turn it over to Siobhan.
Thank you very much. We're going to cross wires here, pardon us. Nobody trips. We'll be walking. Okay, so Jason, thank you. So I'm going to dig a little bit into some of the numbers. It's dry. I will try not to kill you with the details. But before I do, I just want to give you kind of a big picture of what we're doing and why. And people ask us, like, gosh, like why can't you just open the store? You've got all these people, we're all really excited, we want the store, we're all going to shop there. Why can't we just, why do we have to do this? Why do we have to get a market study? Why do we have to get a pro forma? Why do we have to spend all this time playing with the numbers and making things work? And there are three answers to that question. The first answer is that we are following a roadmap to success, okay? We are not the first group to start a food co-op. We are not the 100th group of people to start a food co-op. There is a very well-established and laid out plan for how you go from a group of people, like the group of people that we had in this room, May 31st, 2012, I believe it was. I was there. Was anybody else there? No, just me. All right. That's okay. So there's a blueprint for how you get from something like that to opening day and beyond, right? And how you thrive, okay? And co-ops that follow that blueprint, by and large, are successful. And we want to be successful, right? So we are following those steps. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is that some of the funds that we are going to use to build our store are going to come from a bank, and that bank is going to want to see our market study and our pro forma, okay? And then the third reason is that we as people as a board, we want to have a really high level of confidence going into this capital campaign, that we have a really solid plan, right? You all are my friends and neighbors. And I'm going to invest, and when I ask you to invest, I want to have all of those things to show you. I want to be able to show you the market study and the pro forma. I want you to read the business plan, right? We want everybody to feel really comfortable and confident in this project. So those are the 3 reasons why we're doing what we're doing. And like I said, I'm going to spend a little bit of time. I will try not to kill you with the details. Tom has mentioned, in this slide he mentioned the pro forma. So I thought maybe a good place to start would be to just explain very quickly what the pro forma is. The pro forma financials, we paid a CDS consultant to prepare that for us. And actually, I think we have, Jason, I think we have his, yeah, there he is, Bill Gessner. He is fantastic, okay? And there are a lot of people out there who will prepare pro forma financial statements, okay? But Bill is the one who does it for food co-ops. And all of the assumptions that are built into this document about what our advertising budget should be and where our margins should land and what our department breakouts are going to be, that comes from Bill, right? I have a high degree of faith in Bill. The Cooperative Fund of New England, who is our soon primary lender, they have a very high degree of confidence in Bill. And the pro forma that he provided us, it's amazing, okay? It's an Excel spreadsheet, and it's got multiple tabs, and the first tab is our sources and uses budget. And we are able to play with those inputs, and I'll talk a little bit about the numbers that we're playing with and why. And then we get 10 years of balance sheets, income statements, profit and loss. We get all kinds of ratios. We get department breakouts. We get something called COCOFIST, which stands for Common Cooperative Financial Statement Data, right? Where cooperatives report what they're doing in their departments and what their labor percentages are and what their margins are. And so Bill puts that together, and you can compare yourself to a standard, right? So let's dive in a little bit to some of the numbers. Sales. Sales are driving the bus, okay? It's the combination, it's the interplay between sales, margins, and labor percentages are what ultimately are going to produce profitability, right? We are not here we're not a typical corporation, we're a cooperative, right? But no company, cooperatively owned or otherwise, can lose money and stay in business. So we need to be able to turn a modest profit so that we can fulfill our vision, right? And we can provide for you all, okay? So I'm going to explain a little bit about what's happening here. So the assumption that we're working with currently is that we're looking for about 8,000 square feet of space total, as Tom said, with a 5,000 square foot store. That is a little bit smaller than what we had originally envisioned, okay? But as Jacqueline Hanna says, everybody wants a pony, and what you get is a puppy. So by scaling it down, we've made the project a little bit less expensive and a little bit more manageable, okay? There are 2 things happening. So the first thing that's happening is that in the column on the right, you see numbers for growth in sales, right? So from year 1 to year 2, we are expecting to actually have sales grow by 18.5%, which seems like a large number. It is a large number, right? This is something that is unique to cooperatives in that they start off kind of low and their sales mature over a period of time, okay? This is different from a conventional retailer. Does not experience this kind of maturation in sales. When we originally got our first market study back in 2015, the numbers that we got from Debbie showed that we were going to mature faster, right? I think originally we were expecting 22% from year 1 to year 2, followed by 20%, 2 to 3, and then 18%. And that would have been our total maturation. And then originally she had predicted a mature growth rate of 6%. So when we went back and got the update that we got this year, one of the conversations that came out of that, one of the conversations that we had with Debbie is about this change, okay? And the reality is that the retail grocery industry is changing and has been changing, okay? Co-ops are facing increased competition from conventional stores. Okay? The 2 largest national retailers of natural and organic foods are now Costco and Kroger's, okay? And then you have the addition of this online shopping, and everybody's watching to see what happens with the Amazon acquisition of Whole Foods. So the numbers that we're using are showing that it's going to take longer for our sales to mature, okay? So we are picking up some additional growth in years 5 and 6. And then our mature growth rate is only going to be about 2.5%, okay? So as much as this is a bummer, I was really delighted to find out about this now. It's really good to be able to use these numbers now in our pro forma, as opposed to having just opened or opened a year ago or 2 years ago and not be experiencing the kind of growth that was originally predicted. Are you following me? Yeah, great, okay. So the other thing is, this was an actual sales projection for an actual property that's actually in Maynard that we actually are talking about. But the prediction that Debbie made, the forecast that Debbie made, was that in our first year we would do $3.5 million in sales, all right? And the first thing that we do when we stick the numbers into the pro forma is we discount those sales by 20%, okay? That is sound and conservative planning. Not all co-ops are opening at their projected levels. Some of them are actually opening above the sales forecast, okay? But some are opening below. For most of the co-ops where they're opening below, there's a story and there's a reason that you can kind of point to and say they deviated from this blueprint that we've got in a way that turned out to be really fundamentally bad for them, right? So we discount the sales by 20%. This is probably our floor for any site that comes under serious consideration. A smaller number than that is probably not going to work, just given how much the project is going to cost, right? Let's go ahead and I will save your questions and we'll come back to this if you want me to when we're done. So let's have Jason. Okay. So again, I'm not going to get stuck in this too much. I just want you to know that these are the margins that we're currently using. This is where Bill wants the margins to be. These are numbers that we have the ability to modify on our side, and if we needed to adjust them or play with them a little bit, we could. It would be great not to have to. Having a first-year margin of 34 will enable us to come out with just some really strong pricing when we first open. The reason we get to jump to 36 in year 2 is that we're assuming that we will be able to join NCG, and we will have access to their buying club. And then you see small little increases over time. That's as we get volume. We start being eligible for volume discounts from our suppliers. He's trying to say something.
NCG?
NCG, thank you, the National Cooperative Grocers. They are a national organization. Not all food co-ops are NCG co-ops. Not all of them belong to NCG. NCG is it's a second-tier cooperative, so it's a cooperative of cooperatives. And together, they have a negotiated discount with UNFI, and UNFI, another acronym, I apologize, they are the largest natural foods distributor out there. So when you walk into a Whole Foods or when you walk into a food co-op, most of what's on the shelves has come, aside from the produce, right, but the groceries, the boxes of cereal and the cans of beans and all of that is coming off the UNFI truck. So any discount we can get with UNFI is worth getting. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Eventually we get up to 38, and that is the co-op industry average. And we'll just talk about labor percentages next real quick. So the co-op industry average for labor is 23.8, and the retail grocers average 14. That is quite a disparity. Most conventional grocers are not great to work for, and they don't pay living wages, and they don't give their employees benefits, right? And cooperatives do. I'm not saying that every single employee that we have is going to be full-time, or that every single employee is going to be eligible. But if you look more for a co-op, a higher percentage of their employees are full-time, and a higher percentage are getting benefits versus a conventional grocer. So in year 1, we're actually hoping to leave that at a 26, which would be quite a lot of flexibility. There would be by having a higher number and having a kind of a slow progression down towards 23 over a number of years, that will give the general manager flexibility, right, to cope with any challenges that may come, and to kind of get their bearing, right, and to make any adjustments that need to be made. When East Aurora opened, they had a plan. They had this initial plan for, we're going to have produce and bulk and this and that and the other thing. And after they opened, it became apparent that there was a larger demand for their prepared foods than they had anticipated, okay? And when you give a GM a target of a labor percentage of 26, that GM has the ability to then say, okay, we're just going to go with it, and we're going to expand, and we're going to be able to staff that. We're going to be able to bring people in and just work and just expand that prepared food section kind of as quickly as we can, okay? So again, these are numbers that we do have the ability to play with. I would like to be able to leave them there if at all possible. Okay, I think I've done enough with this. Okay, so as I said, the sales are gonna start off low, and they're gonna mature. Okay, our margins are gonna start off lower, meaning we have less money to work with for every dollar. Right, we're only gonna have 34 cents of that dollar to work with, and we'd like to have the GM be able to have a higher percentage available for staffing. Okay, So those first couple of years are gonna be really gnarly looking, right? We are gonna have operating losses. We are going to spend more money than we take in, okay? So the first thing that's gonna happen, so that year one is just ugly. You just kind of lose money. The first thing that's gonna happen is we are gonna have positive EBITDA. It's another acronym, I apologize. It stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Depreciation and amortization, those are paper losses, okay? But interest and taxes are actual expenditures, okay? But that's your income from operations. That's your net. What's happening as a result of the store, okay? We would like to see positive EBITDA, hopefully in year 2, definitely by year 3, okay? That's what we're going for. We would like to have positive cash, either in year 3 or 4. And then ultimately we will have profitability that may not happen until years 5 to 7. And it really, the store just needs a chance for those sales to ramp up and the margins to get a little higher and those labor costs to come down a little before we can have actual profits. Being profitable by year 7 is seen as a commonly attainable and acceptable goal for a startup food co-op. So our assumed primary lender is quite likely to find that to be acceptable, okay? The one bummer about not being profitable right away is that we can't pay a patronage rebate until we have actual profits. Now, I do also want to remind you too, when we're doing this model, we're using a sales figure that has been discounted on purpose because we want to know we can survive if not everything goes according to plan. There are bumps in the road, okay? If we open only 10% down, or if we open at our sales projections, or God help me if we open above, because that comes with its own set of problems. We will have positive EBITDA by year 2, we'll have positive cash by year 3, and we'll have profitability maybe by year 4 or 5, okay? Monadnock Food Co-op opened in 2012, I think, or 2013. And they were originally projecting, they did the same thing we did, they followed that same path, and they had discounted their sales by 20%, and they were projecting that they would be profitable by around year 7. They have already turned a profit, they did it 3 years early, and they have already paid a patronage rebate to their owners. It was a small one, but they were very, very proud.
And they're opening a second location.
And now they're looking at expansion. So that's the order of things to come. Let's go to the next slide. Let's see, I don't remember what's on it, but she'll have something to say. Hey, okay, so how much is this store going to cost us? This is our current best guess, okay? Again, based on 8,000 square feet total, 5,000 square feet of retail. The largest expense is the leasehold improvements, right? We're currently using $110 per square foot in the pro forma. We believe that that is a reasonable assumption based on what we've heard from Bill and also conversations that we've had with developers in the area. So could it end up being 111 or 112? Yes. Could it come in at 109? Yes. But this is our current working estimate of what it's going to cost to open the store. That's followed by equipment, inventory, fees. Fees is kind of a catch-all. It includes actually a lot of the consulting work that we've already done, our market study, our pro forma. It includes things like the architect and the engineer. There's a lot of things that are included in that category. Startup promotion, that's the ad. Like the little postcard that you mail to everybody saying, we're gonna open on this date, come shop. Startup staffing, that is our general manager. We have made room in the pro forma for a year of GM salary plus benefits, okay? And then the GM will begin hiring the grocery manager and the deli manager, and all of those people will start working and start training, and they will be paid. Okay, so that's startup staffing. Overhead, admin prior to open, that's all the money that we've spent on everything else since May 31st, 2012. All the brochures, all the bumper magnets that y'all have on your cars, all that stuff. Us going to the conferences that we've been going to, the trainings, the C-Build training, all of that is, and Lauren.
Sorry.
Our employee. That's all wrapped up in that figure, okay? Holding site costs, interest, post-opening professional support, working capital. That's nice and big because we want it to be nice and big. We would like to start off with $500,000. That is going to carry us through those initial first couple of years that are really gnarly looking on paper, and ensure that the co-op is able to do what it, the store is able to operate successfully until, as I said, sing with me now, people, sales mature, margins go up, and labor percentages go down. So that's what's going to carry us through that first period of those first initial years. There's an overrun allocation. It's currently 15%. It'll be reduced to 10% as costs become firm. Yes?
I have a question. Where does the working capital come from, that $500,000?
Where does it come from?
How are you going to get that? Have
Yeah.
you got it already?
No. It's part of what's going to be raised. Okay?
Raised, so we have a big capital campaign. Did I miss
Yes,
that?
and that's the next slide. So put this number in your minds, 3,300,000, give or take. Okay? And we'll go to our lovely pie chart. So where is that $3.3 million going to come from? Okay? A small piece of that is people buying ownership shares. Okay? All those $200 checks, right? But if you have 1,200 owners at $200 each, you don't quite get to 3.3 million. A little short. So in a lease scenario, this chart was based on a lease scenario. One of the things that we will be negotiating for is what's called a tenant improvement allowance, where they kick in funds towards what it costs to improve the property. So we don't know what that's going to look like, right? We don't know how much of a landlord contribution we're going to get. We will be applying for grants. We have identified one grant through the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture that we believe we have a high likelihood of obtaining. Food co-ops are specifically listed as eligible projects. And the grant cycle, the next application cycle for that grant is going to open up again in August. All right? And they take applications on a rolling basis through the fiscal year until they run out of money. Bank loans, okay? We will have a primary bank loan that will be collateralized by our equipment and then a small portion by our inventory. We are going to have a maximum loan amount, okay? That lender is going to calculate our collateral. They're going to give us credit for 75% of our equipment and 25% of our inventory, and that is going to be the maximum that we can borrow from that bank. It is possible to go out and get subordinated, uncollateralized loans. They are riskier for the banks, and so the banks charge higher interest rates. So that is very expensive money to borrow, okay? Possible, right? And then, of course, there's this capital campaign, okay? So I don't have precise figures right now to give you, right? But the goal is, by the time we get to launching the capital campaign, we will have a dollar amount, a very specific dollar amount, that we are looking to raise from the owners, because we'll know our loan amounts. We will have negotiated for a site. We'll know what we're getting from the landlord for a tenant improvement allowance. We will have applied for a grant, okay? And then we just need to fill in the rest of that pie with the capital campaign, okay? Let's do another slide, shall we? We are not alone. We have never been alone, and we are still not alone. We are going to hire a campaign consultant, okay? And there's some really great consultants out there. So they are going to train the board and the volunteers to execute a quick and effective campaign. We would like to begin the campaign soon after the site is secured. There are good times of the year and not so good times of the year to do a capital campaign. The best time to get to people is right after the kids go back to school in the fall, but before Thanksgiving. You've got like a window. And then once you get to Thanksgiving, you don't do anything, and you wait, and you can kind of come back in January and pick it up again and do a second phase if you need to. Summers are not as good because people are on vacation, and but we may not get to be picky about the timing of this campaign. We will try like heck to make it all work out, to get all the dominoes set up in a row, where it's all nice and orderly and things follow in the way that they should. But site selection, this is a really tricky phase. Like, this is the trickiest, hardest phase out of all of them, because the site selection process is somewhat unpredictable. And I just have to learn how to be okay with that. It's very hard for me. I like order.
You can do what you want.
Just a little bit. So there's a lot of anecdotal data out there from other co-ops that have done capital campaigns, and the word on the street, what they tell me, is that typically 1 in 4 of your owners will lend, and the average investment is typically between $3,000 and $5,000. So put another way, you can expect to generate about $1,000 for each owner that you have. Okay? So from our 984 owners, we would expect to be able to raise $984,000. We will be looking to raise a little bit more than that. Okay? But that's why you wait until you get to 900. But Jacqueline also likes to point out too, if only 20% of your owners lend, and the average loan is only about $3,000, then really you need more owners than just the 1,000.
We can do it.
I'll let that all sink in for a little while.
I think it is important that you note this, and it's one of the owner numbers tend to die off once you reach that minimum threshold of site search phase, and before you announce a location. This is community driven from start to finish, which means at every point all of us have an opportunity to play a role in opening our store, and we've become owners. We purchased a share. Many of us have volunteered as well, or told neighbors. But to make sure that we have that quick, effective capital campaign, and I'm sorry to interrupt.
No.
I think this is a pretty telling chart here. Your neighbor is 985. Your friend is 986. And so all of these become inching our way up toward that capital campaign goal within that 4 to 6 month period. So it's important, in other words, that we're all still, trying. And I know most of us have done this ad nauseum for our neighbors and friends, trying to still bring people we know who value the co-op and do value local food into membership.
All right, let's see what's next. Oh, okay, good. So when we go to do our capital campaign, there are 2 kinds of investments that are being considered by the board. And we don't have a final decision yet as to whether we're going to do just one or just the other or both. And there are pros and cons to both kinds of investments. And partly it'll be decided by the pro forma. I would like to do both. I would like to have both options available. And then the only bummer about that is that it's a little bit harder to explain because there's two options and you kind of have to impart more information. But if you can kind of get over the hurdle of needing to get the things separated in your brain, I would like to be able to give people different options. I would like to make it easy and comfortable for people to invest. So, I mean, I have loans. I've had a car loan. I've got a mortgage. So when I think of the word loan, I think of monthly payment, right? If it's a car loan, it might be a 5-year loan, and I make a monthly payment, and some of that payment goes to principal and some of it's interest, right? That's the way loans typically work. The kind of, the way that co-ops do member loans is a little bit different, and so it does require a little bit of education. So loans do have set interest rates and set terms, okay? So you might want a 4-year loan or a 5-year loan or a 6-year loan, and that loan might pay you 2% or 2.5% or 3%, okay? The interest will accrue and is compounded annually. Loans have a single payment at maturity. This is how they're kind of substantially different from what most people think of in their head when they think of a loan, right? This is part of what's a bummer. As interest accrues and is deducted by the co-op on the co-op's taxes, owners will receive 1099s for that interest, except they won't actually get the check for that interest. But they will get the 1099, they'll have to put it on their taxes. Or, I should say, you would be advised to put it on your taxes. What you do is between you and the IRS. So you would be reporting, we would be reporting the accrued interest, even though you're not actually getting a check. And so like I said, you would get a single payment at loan maturity. That would be all of that compounded interest plus the original principal. Yes.
Given that the interest rates appear to only be 2-3%,
They are low.
that tax would be relatively small, correct? If the loan is, say, $5,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody's getting rich off of, you
Yeah.
are getting rich because you're getting the store.
Yes.
That is how we are all getting rich together, is we are getting the store that we want, that we're gonna love, but the loan is only gonna pay you a very modest rate of interest,
Yes.
right?
Basically.
So we will likely be paying loans back between 4 and 10 years, between years 4 and 10, right? There will be a minimum loan amount. Owners can pool funds to make a loan if they want to. So if the minimum loan amount is $1,000, and you want to get with your neighbor and have each of you put in $500 and together make the loan, you absolutely can do that. You would each get a 1099 for half of the interest, okay? Let's talk about preferred shares next. That's the other investment vehicle. So when a preferred share pays a dividend, you actually do get the check in the mail, okay, and the corresponding 1099, okay. But preferred shares will not have guaranteed dividends. Dividends would be declared by the board of directors each year, okay. So there's also no set redemption date. So unlike a loan, where you say, okay, I've got a 7-year loan, I'm getting my money back at, by the end of year 7. A preferred share is more of a long-term investment. So the preferred share is going to be $1,000. You might buy a preferred share with the expectation that you would own that for a period of time, a longer period of time. We are modeling paying a dividend every year in our pro forma, and I just want to talk for just a minute about that. Most co-ops, most startup food co-ops, when they ask their owners to buy preferred shares, they actually don't plan to start paying dividends on those preferred shares right away. A lot of the co-ops, they just have it in the prospectus and they make it very clear to people that they're going to start paying dividends once they're profitable, right? Which again, might be between years 5 and 7 or 8. All right. I didn't love that. To me, it just felt like that was just a little bit too much of an ask, a little bit too much of a stretch to say you're just going to invest, you're going to buy a preferred share, and someday, I mean, yes, you get the store, right? That's the most important thing, but that we don't know when we're going to start paying a dividend. So to me, I really wanted to model paying that dividend every year and starting in year 1. So that is how we are modeling it in our pro forma. Can I guarantee that you're going to get a dividend? No, because I can't guarantee success. I can't, right? I can't see the future, right? I can tell you that we're doing everything that we're supposed to be doing, but I can't promise, right? But it is in the pro forma that we are going to start. This is something we feel strongly that we want to do, is we want to start paying dividends on those preferred shares right away. So because you can't get the investment back for a longer period of time, we are modeling paying a higher dividend on the preferred shares than we will be paying in interest on the loans. So it's going to land somewhere between 3 and 5% per year. And then just so you know, owners cannot pool funds to buy a preferred share. That's preferred shares, you're not allowed to do that. It's just a funky thing about it. Dividends are not required to be paid in arrears if missed. They're non-cumulative, but the board of directors could choose to do so. So that's what I've got on preferred shares. Is there anything you wanted to add about those two different?
No, I think what you
Lauren?
mentioned at the end there.
Go to Facebook.
Yeah, what you mentioned at the end there, that they cost, you might have said this, they cost $1,000, and there will be a minimum purchase requirement for this too, I think when we had talked about it together.
Yeah, probably two shares,
Right.
just because of
So-
the paperwork.
So and that's
takes time and money.
that's one of the hurdles for buying a preferred share, but it comes with, if you're investing more, you're getting higher, essentially interest rate. It's not really an interest rate, it's a dividend, but you're essentially making more by investing more. And the other advantage of preferred shares is that should things be going well and the board decide, as you hope they will,
Right.
You get that annual dividend in year 1. You don't have to wait for the maturity of a loan.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And I just remembered the other thing I wanted to say about this. One of the options that we are exploring is trying to figure out how to make it possible for somebody to purchase a preferred share from inside a retirement account. All right. And it may be that we have to structure the offering as a direct public offering to do that. But I have heard from people, I've already been talking with people kind of informally about the capital campaign, and I do hear from people that they already think of their retirement account as a long-term investment, right? So generally speaking, it would be appropriate for you if you have a fairly decent time horizon between now and retirement, but they're already thinking of that money as long-term, in a long-term investment. It's also, generally speaking, would be good for somebody where the amount of money that you're going to put into preferred shares is a pretty small percentage of the total assets in the account, right? We're not looking for somebody to take their entire IRA and use it to purchase preferred shares. That's not, right? That's not where we're going with this. But we have had some interest in that. right? And then the money is tax qualified, it stays tax qualified, dividends go to your brokerage company and you don't have to pay taxes on it currently, right? And it can just be one of your investments in your retirement account. So for some people that does feel like a good option. The paperwork for that is going to be somewhat onerous, so to do that we are probably going to have a higher share purchase requirement. But that is one option that we're looking at as well. So we're trying to give people choices so that they can pick an investment that feels like a good fit for them, that feels like a good match for them. That might be all I have. Yeah, that's it. Thank you for
Tom, did you have
sticking through that with me.
No? Okay. Should we turn
Tom,
on the
yeah,
lights?
Tom's gonna come back, I
So-
think,
Yeah.
Yeah, let's put the
and
lights
then
on.
we'll
So,
Yeah, so open to questions now, and I don't have a mic, so we'll just,
yeah.
if you
so
can, just
here.
speak loudly if you don't have the mic.
Don't hold
Yeah,
it that
I'd
close.
say let's have people come to the mic, or the mic come to them.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
Hey, before you answer any questions, can you repeat the question, because not all of us can hear.
yeah, we can do that.
Yep.
Just if you're coming up to, if you're going to ask a question, if you are willing and able, please come up here and say it to this microphone, just so that everybody on Facebook Live can hear you. Do you want to call people up, or do you want me to do it?
Sure.
All right.
You
you're
guys,
first.
you've done this at town meeting, right? Where you
Yeah.
queue up and
Yeah,
you have
we're
to
on-
say your name and
yeah.
your street where you live. Do it like that.
So I'm Kathy Larson. I live on High Street in Maynard, and I've been a member since 4 or 5 years. And I hadn't heard about this capital campaign, or I'm blocking the thing here.
It doesn't project to us. Yeah.
This capital campaign and the 1,100 owners, that's new, right? And so I'm wondering, did you know about that 4 or 5 years ago, or did you just learn about that recently?
Yeah.
And what other new things do we not know? Or are you not telling us about?
Thank you. So everybody can hear, we have an early owner who didn't know that the capital campaign was going to happen. We have been hearing that a lot, especially from the early owners. We did know that we were going to need to raise money from the owners. What we didn't do was speak about that effectively in the very beginning. We also, in the beginning, we were not planning for this project to be this expensive. Okay. We didn't think the project was going to be this expensive. Back when we started, back in 2012, we were guessing maybe somewhere between $1.5 million and maybe as much as $2 million, but not 3.3. So, in that sense, I apologize for anybody who feels like they're just learning about the capital campaign. If they feel really taken aback by that, I am sorry. We had known in the very beginning that we were going to be doing this. We had talked about member loans. Okay, preferred shares is a fairly newer, more recent investment vehicles that co-ops have just started using, right? The more traditional method is the member loan. But we didn't include that as, we didn't have it at the forefront of the messaging where maybe we should have. And so when we hired Lorne, that was one of the first things after he kind of got up to speed and he started doing all these events and he took over the social media and he started interacting with people. One of the first big pieces of feedback that he brought back to the board was, hey, nobody knows there's going to be a capital campaign. And so we didn't know that nobody knew, right? We really didn't. We didn't understand that it really was something new for people, that they really hadn't heard about it. We really didn't understand that in a way that we understand that more fundamentally now. And that's part of the reason that Lauren developed that graphic, the really great grow, fund, build. And Lauren now incorporates that into his messaging when he's out. And I know that if you've tabled more recently, if you've done a training with Lauren, or if you've had that experience, if you're a recent person and you've spoken to him behind the table, he's really out there now with that in a way that we weren't in the beginning. And no, there's not anything else to know. There certainly is not anything bigger or more encompassing than that lurking in the background that we'll bring out at the next meeting. No, we're not.
I would just add one quick thing to that, and that's that all of the things that we've seen here, the market study, the sales forecast, and the pro forma are all based on, their scientific guesses. They're based on information that we've gotten and has been put together from other co-ops that have started. But until we know exactly where the site is and how much it costs to develop it, those numbers are still,
assumptions. Still
So
assumptions.
that's the one thing that I would say is that the number right now on the projection is $3.3 million, but there's nothing to say that it couldn't come in at 3.5 or 3.9 or whatever.
Or 2.9.
Or that sales come in 10% down instead
and maybe
of 20%.
we'll get a $500,000 grant,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Well,
maybe
that's sound planning, right?
we'll get a big tenant improvement allowance and a $500,000 grant. It's some of these numbers are up in the air. So near me here, I'll hand this to you. Oh, you know what? No, I'm sorry, Troy. I'm sorry, Troy. He was in line.
Get in line.
So we'll do Troy, and then I will come back to you.
If you could go up towards the podium. I'll go to the podium.
You don't have to say your name. It's okay. You can just ask a question.
Troy Liston, Glendale Street. I just don't come from like a background of working in retail stores or understanding exactly how much square footage things are. So could you tell us a little bit about either what approximately the size of a store we know around the area is approximately 5,000 square feet, or say something that is 10,000 so I can understand like half the size of that or something like that?
Hope can.
Please.
It's right behind you.
Hey, I'm Ellen Greendale. I work at ARC Specialties. Our store is 900 square feet, so we're pretty small. 5,000 square feet would be about the size of the CVS, I think, give or take, maybe a little smaller.
What do you think, Lauren?
So the only one I know, because there's a big sign on them because they just went out of business, is the old EMS in Acton. If you've ever been there, that's the old EMS in Acton is 3,500 square feet of retail. So add 1,500, and if you know your house, you could spread it out to one floor, maybe live on one floor, and take down the walls. Right next to Trader Joe's.
And Trader Joe's itself is 10,000 square feet.
Total.
So that could be a good.
Yeah, so the official answer was bigger than the EMS, but smaller than the Trader Joe's. All right, and now I am gonna let you.
I'm Nan Tenney on Brook Street, and I'm an early owner, I guess. Sort of, I don't know even what number it is anymore. It was a long time ago. I'm thinking about the spirit of this organization and how I had remembered co-ops that I've been in. Very simple ones in the beginning in Concord in somebody's basement, and then even before that in a storefront in San Francisco. And I just feel very, very, excited about what's going on. I admire all your work, but I'm feeling that I have a suggestion that if you're going to be, trying to make another wave of fundraising, that it might be very important to have that site identified.
Oh, yes. Yes, thank you. So her point was that we are not going to launch the capital campaign until we have a site.
All right,
Period.
Then I have
Yes.
something else. So then, what Lauren's been doing is marvelous and has gotten the spirit part of it really flowing. And I just think that maybe more committees about, what's going to be in the store, spreading that out to the owner's possible jurisdiction then, because at the moment it feels to me, it feels very business-like. it doesn't feel community or creative and spiritual. So, and I think, I mean, a co-op is a place where people are inspired to eat healthily and move towards a more sustainable lifestyle. So it becomes a place of teaching and learning. And I think those kinds of aspects could be brought out in order to inspire people, because I know many people who are pretty exhausted by this process. And I've talked to them, their friends, and 2 years ago, and I said, oh, well, we've kind of forgotten. So, they're not expecting it even in their back of their mind. So I hope that we could renew that and have people come to be as a member as a cultural endeavor. That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, thank you.
Nunnery, can I?
I'm going to let Lauren. I know I'm going to let Lauren answer that.
Yeah. So, and I wanted to say a couple of things in response to that. I think you're dead on, and working so hard to make sure that we have, because it is a business that thrives, as the board is doing, and all the numbers and the drowning in the numbers and the site search and the pro formas and getting into sites and negotiate, all of that becomes, it's hard to keep that spirit alive. And when it comes to co-ops, I mean, there's no more spirited and compassionate and culturally rich organization out there. That's what co-op, that is the foundation of it. And one of the things that I've come to find in the past year is that even with simple social media posts, the social media posts where I don't hold back, like when I get really amped or angry about something going on in our food system and I post something about that, the co-op spirit comes out of all of you. I mean, the response is like, there's 7,500, 8,000 people responded to a post about why we can't get 99-cent eggs and the fact that small farmers are being screwed over by these large corporations. I hadn't typically been posting that because, I want to kind of go down the middle and get, but what I find is that sometimes we need to do that. And I think you're absolutely right, not just on social media, but we need more, you don't go to your typical supermarket and take a wild foraging class, or come together for a kids' cooking class, or have a night at a local brewery. And so that is where we distinguish ourselves, and we need to, and I need to, continue to try to do that more effectively. One of the things I think that's important to note across all three of you that have mentioned, brought stuff up tonight. In terms of this long, arduous process and the understandable impatience and frustration and even anger sometimes. When 2.5 years in, I joined in summer 2014, almost 4 years ago. 2.5 years in, I said, where the heck is my co-op? So I get that until I found out about this process. Most of the co-ops that started in basements, as spirited as they are in the 60s and 70s, aren't still around. That said, 2/3 of co-ops that are still around have been around for more than 30 years. So the ones that do it right, do it right. We're lucky to have this long timeline in some sense because we get to conduct these exhaustive market and feasibility studies that are also exhaustive to us. But it is a process. And I think one of the things I wouldn't put it like urging you guys to cut the board slack. That's like in the back of my head. What I would put it is this way. When these board members, Siobhan's been with it since the start, Tom's been with it for a very long time, and we've gone through a number of board members, putting in hours and hours, volunteering hours and hours outside of their day jobs and family lives each week to make sure that the co-op we open actually succeeds and doesn't close a year later. When they came to this at the start, they were you and me. Uneducated about co-ops, eager about local food, wanting to help their local farmer, wanting that community spirit and a business that actually cares about the community it serves, but not knowing how it goes.
And now we're just horribly jaded.
Yeah.
No. I get really focused on the numbers because that's my job and that's what I'm doing. But other people are focused on the community stuff. And that still is why we're here and what we're doing, and we are doing it all together.
And I think that when you're talking about, like, you know, we didn't know about this before, we didn't know about this before, I'm right with you. Because when I came and interviewed for the position and they talked about the capital campaign, I said, what capital campaign?
Yeah.
So that was where I was like, we have to get this out now so that the bomb is a smaller bomb.
It's legit, because I think your point is very legitimate, that, you know, you're not co-op professionals, you were just
They are
learning,
now.
and, yeah, but, so
Well,
I'm
we
okay
weren't.
with that. I'm just,
In the beginning. I thought this whole thing would take us 2 years start to finish. That's what I thought walking out of that first meeting that I went to, and it's been a little bit longer than that.
Other questions?
I just want to know, how much do you have to stay within a model? Or can you be more independent and take a risk and just feel the flow of what people want, not what the model wants?
Yeah, so the question was, how much are we obligated to or committed to personally as a board, I'm not on the board, staying with the model, this prescribed model of grow, fund, build, and doing it in this way, and how much can we be independent and creative and go outside the box for those?
Part of the answer to that question is, unfortunately, back to this numbers business stuff. If we really wanted to go out and do our own thing and open the store our own way, we would have to pay for it ourselves completely. So if we want to get a bank loan, we have to have a good enough business plan, and we have to show that we are with it. I mean, I guess maybe I'm not understanding the question. It's our co-op. This is our co-op. And the goal is to open the store that we want. And we've been talking with people and listening to people for a very long time now talk about what they want from their store. And our goal is to give that to them, to us, to me. I want this store too, for myself, for my children. I want to have a bulk section. I want to have local produce, right? But I guess I'm not understanding really what you mean by deviate. Like,
No, that's not the
like
word.
how far out of the box are you suggesting that we try to go? I guess.
Well, I'm a creative person, so I'm thinking as you're moving along and something appears to you, maybe this is more of the aha than what this is keeping us on.
But there's nothing that is predetermining what our store will feel like or look like. What the path that we're following is getting a market study, and we are telling the market study analyst what kind of a store we're going to be. We could form a cooperative to sell soda pop and bubble gum if we really wanted to. That's not why I'm here, right? So yeah. Maybe you and I should speak after, because
Okay.
I'm
Can I just
let's
add
do
to
that.
Yeah, let's.
Yeah.
I think I know what your question was asking, and I will say from the way my brain works, is unfortunately not that creative, is that I think what the board has been doing and what these co-ops have been doing for so many years is, even though we would like to be creative, I think what they're saying is, if you look at the realm of what's happened with co-ops and how they've worked, this trajectory, this model is going to get you success. And I think what Siobhan was saying was that follow that model financially, but it doesn't mean you can't use that creative spirit in your outreach and mustering support.
And in the store.
And in the store.
In the store when we get it.
That's to that point.
Yeah, so I think
This is
it's-
our
I
store.
just think it's taking a long time.
Yes, ma'am.
It is.
Yes,
it is.
Down,
Yeah, I think we're all really impatient.
People really don't understand that.
Yeah. So I think
And
maybe
our
more
self.
creativity in our outreach. I'm not so great at that all the time, so I can't give that. But I don't know if that helps to. I think you were kind of saying like, oh, but do we have to do it this. For me, from a financial perspective, I think we do need to, for the most part, follow those things that have proven successful. But I think in terms of the store and how we do the campaign itself, there can be a ton of creativity.
And just one question.
You know what,
Other
I'm
co-ops, other
actually
co-ops,
gonna
how long
ask
do they
you to
take?
wait.
I just want to know how long.
On average, 5 to 8 years to open. So we have been
River
at
Valley
this now
took
for 5
10.
years.
Okay, River Valley took 10, again, because they had a couple sites fall through. So site selection is really tricky to predict how long they'll be there. But let's let somebody
I
else.
feel bad. I had a more business-oriented question. But,
No.
how, in the sales pro forma, how did you take into account the impact of the grocery store that's anticipated going to the Parker Street location? Which that seems like a bigger variable to me than the established ones. In the
That's a
region.
great question, and thank you. So both of the market study analysts, Debbie from G2G and Marcia from Dakota, they both know that a grocery store is planned for 129 Parker. And Debbie actually, at the time that she came, we still thought it was going to be a Market 32. So when she did her numbers, she was assuming that it was going to be a Market 32. Does everybody?
It's like Price
Mar-
Chopper 2.0.
Oh. It's Price Chopper's rebrand. And that,
There's one in Sutton.
yeah,
And-
Market 32 was originally under lease to go into 129 Parker. They have since pulled out of that lease. And it looks like it's not going to be a Market 32. We are assuming that it is going to be a kind of a large format conventional store. So we are assuming that it's not going to end up being a Whole Foods, for example. Yeah, sorry.
And we're not assuming that it's going to be us.
Let me refer you back to.
I'm going to refer you back to Tom, who was very clear that we're not discussing sites until they've been negotiated.
Of course.
Although we don't know what supermarket will be at 129 Parker, their building is a 68,000 square foot supermarket.
Wow.
Significantly
It's big.
larger than
Goals.
what we're looking to do.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth noting that while we need to plug that any new competition that comes into the area back into our market and feasibility study to make sure that we're still on track, and we are doing that. People shop at a food co-op, as you know, for a much different reason than they shop at a conventional grocery store.
Right.
They shop there because they love their local community. They love their local farmers. They want local food. They want healthier food. They want fresher food. They want a thriving local economy. I mean, I could go on, but we're shopping there for a much different reason. And by example, or a parallel, River Valley Food Co-op, you guys have heard this. If you're owner 600 on, you've heard this out of my mouth, so I'm sorry. But River Valley Food Co-op opened in 2008, right as the market crashed. The whole shebang crashed. It also located itself on the outskirts of Northampton, which ticked a lot of people off. Northampton is a great walkable downtown, but in many ways it's like Maynard. There aren't a lot of places you can locate a grocery store, so they located it on the outskirts. And they located 5 minutes away from a Big Y, Super Stop and Shop, and Walmart. And despite that, 5 years later, they're generating $20 million in annual sales in 2013. It's continued to grow. They now have more than 7,000 owners, and they source from more than 350 local farms and food producers. So,
They're opening a second store in East End.
Oh, I didn't know that. Their store is massive in Northampton, and there's a shuttle now, it's so popular, that takes people from the center of town out to the outskirts to do their grocery shopping. So the potential for success is there, especially when you do the market studies to determine whether there is enough thirst in the area for local food. And there is. You need only go to the farmers markets around here to see people want local food. They understand why it's important. You understand.
Following up on just that point.
The answer was yes.
Yes, no, I appreciate that. The other question I had, besides the one that Ellen just had, was what's the reason, the difference between a food co-op and a conventional grocery store that makes the co-op sort of start slow and snowball up in sales so dramatically that you mentioned.
Why do co-ops kind of
why aren't we ready to
lower
go
and
right
mature?
away? Just with all the energy that you just talked about.
So there's
Do you want to take that?
Sure. There are a couple of things. I think the first is that one of the things that happens is that you've got a built-in number of owners that will immediately start shopping at the store, but then you're doing outreach once the store opens, and you're also attracting and hoping that many of the people that come in that weren't owners become owners and then continue to shop. So that's one of the differences. Whereas like when the Whole Foods opened in Sudbury, probably the biggest year of sales that they're going to ever have, other than the sort of small year over year, or just sort of whatever the inflationary growth, will be the first year that they open, because they went out and they're an established store out of an established chain. They did a huge marketing campaign, which we will need to do wherever we're located. But they weren't. You don't become a member and have an additional reason to continue shopping at a conventional grocery store as you would in a co-op. So in general, 50% of the people that shop at the store are owners of most co-ops. And so as you continue to get more people shopping at the store, you continue to get more owners, and so it tends to build that way a little bit differently than a conventional store.
And when our labor costs are 10% higher than a conventional grocery store, that is a piece of that slower growth as well.
Well, that's the difference in the margin, and then the other things that if you took a look at Siobhan's chart in terms of the difference between what the margins were in conventional stores versus co-ops, and the labor rate versus conventional stores and co-ops, and you add them together and you say, okay, well, wow, and they must be way more profitable, and the short answer is yes, they are, and the money is not going to their owners. Well, it is going to their owners, but the owners are not the people that are shopping in the store.
Right.
So.
It's not benefiting the community. Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, a company like Whole Foods has a tremendous amount of resources, and they have a tremendous amount of pre-existing name recognition. So we are building, and we still encounter people, oh, I didn't know there was going to be a co-op. I can't imagine anybody hasn't heard of us because we've been shouting from the rooftops for a long time now, but we still meet people who haven't heard of us, okay? So we do have a budget for, it was on the slide, like an initial marketing, but pre-open, right? And that'll be some kind of a postcard, a direct mailing, But we just don't have the same kind of ability to advertise that a Whole Foods or a Trader Joe's or a Stop and Shop does. Right? And so people have to discover us. And they're going to discover us, and they're going to come, and they're going to love it because it's going to be awesome. And then they're going to come back, and then they're going to come back again, and then they're going to join. That's what's going to happen.
And I'd add just one other thing, and that's the difference in terms of the target market that stores have. So one of the things that we've looked at in the market studies and some of the analysis that they do, and I'm horrible at remembering the names, but there's essentially a phenomenon which says how far is somebody willing to drive to get to a store. And if they encounter a similar store on the way in terms of, so if I liked shopping at Shaw's for whatever reason, but they built a Stop and Shop between where I lived and the Shaw's that I had been going to, probably likely that I'm just going to start going to the Stop and Shop because it's closer and they're fairly common in terms of what they've got on their shelves. But people shop at a co-op for a much different reason, as Lauren was saying, and so they're willing to drive a lot farther, and there are very few things that would cause them to veer off. I mean, the one that we saw in specific is that Whole Foods, when we had them redo the market study, they projected at the time that there would be a drop in sales of what they projected of about 7%, given the number of people that would be closer to Whole Foods than they would be to Maynard to drive, and they'd say, well, all right, the co-op is fine, but Whole Foods is here, it's probably close enough. So I think that's sort of the thing that happens, and it's similar, I guess, in the other way, that as the word gets out over time, you know, you're going to see more people driving further and to come to the co-op to shop.
I think you guys see this at all sorts of small businesses. Is that all right?
More questions, I think.
Okay. I just wanted to quickly say, you know, and you see this at all small businesses. We do it ourselves. I don't think, well, there probably are people in here who don't shop on Amazon. But count me one of the guilty who does shop on Amazon. Small businesses, including the co-op, that want to survive and thrive in the age of Amazon and whatever else comes next, have to give folks a reason to come into the store besides low prices and convenience. You're not going to be, even if you do beat Amazon on prices, and some folks do, the outdoor store actually quite often does in Maynard, but you're not going to beat them on convenience. So people need a reason to come in outside of that. So you see outdoor stores, not this outdoor store, but the one in Concord, does fly fishing classes, product demonstrations, these sorts of things. So offering classes and offering a community gathering space, offering food from the farmer down the street that you know and that you like, all of those are reasons to come in besides low price and convenience. And that's, you know, that's what folks want.
Do we have a few more questions?
I'm going to speak for Facebook because the question that came up in the chat actually
Oh, great.
tied in. So people on Facebook were wondering if we're willing to compromise on our parking requirements and if we've considered a minimal parking model. That's Tom.
Yeah, we did talk about that, but they meant
Yeah, so the short answer to that is probably not a lot. I mean, the range that we put in there for a 5,000 square foot retail store is 25 to 35 parking spaces. And the reason that you need them is exactly because of the example that I gave when I was talking before. And when people come to a store and they drive in and they see that the parking lot is full, so say you only had 12 parking spaces, if every time I come to shop at the co-op the parking lot's full, pretty soon I'm not going to bother to come there because it's just really inconvenient. I can't find any place to park. So the estimate and what they've seen, it's a ratio of the square footage of the store to the number of parking spaces that you need, so that the likelihood is that when people come to shop, they'll find some place to park.
Can I add something to that?
Oops.
I want to add to that. We are not going to find perfect.
Right.
We're not going for perfect. Our job, we have a responsibility to make a decision as to what is good enough and what is not good enough. Okay? So, is there going to be leeway on the parking? Some, but it is a thing. It's a real issue. So there are examples of co-ops that have opened with insufficient parking, and it hasn't gone well for them, right? And so, we can show you examples of co-ops that have not thrived, and that's part of the reason. So we don't want that to be our story.
Siobhan, one of the numbers that you have said to me quite often is that we have found that more than 80% of our shopping power, our household...
83% of our sales are going to come from outside of Maynard.
So while I have heard from owners who have told me verbatim, you're just going to have to get over the parking thing. You know, people will walk to the co-op.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll walk to the co-op to buy a bottle of kombucha on a hot day, or whatever you buy, but like Tom gave as the example, a mom or dad with 2 kids in tow in the middle of winter is not going to walk to the co-op to do a full week's grocery shopping, and we do not become profitable and a successful store by selling a bottle of kombucha or what you can carry out in 1 or 2 hands. We become profitable the same way that, you know, Trader Joe's does when I go there and I do my full week of shopping on Wednesday or whatever day I do it. So yes, we will get foot traffic, but given number 1 that that's not going to keep us afloat, and number 2 that more than 80% of our shopping is going to come from outside of Maynard, which is a great thing for Maynard if it's located here. We can't go with no parking, or we can't kind of toss parking up into the clouds.
Into the category.
We can bend if we need to,
right.
But it is one of the top priorities.
Do we have anything? I know we've been here a long time, and I really appreciate your giving us all this time. It is about 12 minutes to 9. So the library is going to close at 9. So you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. So do we have another question or two that we could? No? Yes.
That's a problem.
Oh.
You keep that one up.
No, you don't. It's only if you want to be on camera.
Quick question on the preferred shares. Is there a
Yeah.
redemption or sale to the next person, or how would that work?
So eventually the preferred shares would be redeemed, correct. It wouldn't be in those first couple of years. So while the co-op is busy paying back the loans, we would not presumably be in a position to redeem preferred shares. It'll say it in the prospectus that the board of directors can redeem a preferred share for unusual circumstances. It's at the discretion of the board. And then when we start redeeming them, that's another good point. Let's say we do $700,000 in preferred shares. We're not going to redeem all $700,000 of preferred shares in a single year. So once we get to where we're redeeming them, it'll be maybe $100,000 a year or $150,000 a year. So people would be indicating an interest to us that they want them redeemed. But if you've got it and it's paying you a 5% dividend every year and you're happy with that, maybe you don't want to be the first person in line to get it back. Okay? Yes?
Are all owners required to?
No, I'm sorry. That I apologize for. I should have made that clear up front in a loud voice right at the beginning. It is not a requirement for you to participate in the capital campaign. Absolutely not.
And all owners have an equal voice and an equal vote,
Thank you.
regardless of whether you contribute more than your owner's share to
Right.
the co-op.
Preferred shares do not come with voting rights. You cannot buy an outsized opinion in the cooperative. You don't get to vote your shares or a personal, okay? So we are still a cooperative and it's one person, one vote. That's right. Yes,
the comment I have was on a previous question concerning following exactly the procedure. And an example of not following the exact procedure might be for, we have 970 owners now.
984.
Whatever the number is. The point is that it says for the capital campaign, 1,100 to 1,200 owners. Presumably, we could start the capital campaign tomorrow with 984. So that's one way to not to follow the precise procedure, but at least being close.
Yes.
So that was my comment.
Thank you. Thank you. So really what it comes down to is when do we secure the site? That is the first fundamental thing that needs to happen. And then we will know how much we need to raise, right? We will have negotiated successfully, hopefully, for a pretty decent tenant improvement allowance. We will be applying for grants. We will be applying for bank loans at that point. We've been in communication with our lenders. We've developed relationships, right? With the Cooperative Fund of New England, okay, so I've known Maggie Cohn, our loan officer, for years now. And I really look forward to the day when we can actually submit the loan application.
Can I just follow up real quickly?
Yeah.
So one of the other things that you talked about was, we have, whatever it is, 1,100 to 1,200 owners at the time that you did the capital campaign. That's also somewhat based on a general phenomenon that occurs with most co-ops, that as soon as they announce a site, they have a huge spike in the number of owners because there's probably 100 or 200 people that are sitting out there saying, hey, I really like the idea of a co-op, but I'm not going to give you $200 until it's a little more real. And once you say it's going to be in this space and this is where we're going to start the capital campaign, it's then real enough for a lot of people to kick in their $200 and become owners.
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent point.
I just wanted to thank you for all the work you're doing. I think it really is excellent work.
On the new construction on Route 27 South and 117, is that, I can't get up.
It's fine, I'll just point it out.
On the new construction south, on Route 27 South and 117, that whole open area, is that off limits for us, or is that? being considered?
That was the 129 Parker Street that they were talking about before, and I would refer you back to the slide that says that any potential sites that we're discussing are not going to be discussed publicly until we actually sign a lease.
Yeah.
Right, and looking at everything that's out there.
Absolutely.
We are looking at absolutely everything that's out there, I promise you.
Within the town limits of Maynard.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jason's on our board. Do you have a question?
No, I just wanted to say a couple things. I have not been working on this as long as Siobhan, but I have been on the board for a while. So, we all feel that it's taken a while. We're doing our due diligence. One of the reasons for the meeting tonight was that we've been working on so much stuff to make sure that we're doing this in a responsible manner. And just sort of another comment on the, how far can we deviate and are we comfortable deviating from this model and all this? Over the years, we've gotten comments and suggestions, things like, oh, why don't we start a buying club in the basement of someone or in some church or whatever. And throughout the entire time I've been on the board, we have been very focused, laser focused. The reality is, it might seem simpler to, hey, let's just open up a buying club and start small and we'll expand from there. The reality is there's a lot of logistics, there's a lot of planning, and a lot of effort that goes into something like that. And what we've heard from the beginning, from all of the community outreach that we've done and to our community of owners and beyond and potential owners, is that we're all here, we're looking for a full-service grocery store. And that's what we've heard, and that's what we are focused on. So these other potential ideas, it might be nice, but ultimately it's a distraction from the ultimate goal of what we want to do and what we've heard that the community wants and wants to do. So I just thought, it's taken a while. We're all there. We're all in the same boat. But we're going as quick as we can. We're being responsible, and we're staying focused on our ultimate goal here.
Thank you. Thanks. I think we're going to wrap it up so that we can pack up our computers and put the chairs.
If you guys have more questions, tap me on the shoulder on the way out, and I'll be here packing stuff
yep.
up.
And
so
Nancy, I'm happy to talk with you further. It can be tomorrow. Are you good?
Thank you all.